Let's do like a little cut right now where you say the right name. Do you want to do that, or
I'll just take that part out. Yeah.
Just
You are now listening to the Ringside Renaissance Wrestling Podcast.
Welcome to the Ringside Renaissance Wrestling Podcast. I'm Andrew. I'm here with Jesse and Kev. And today we're talking about our top baby faces. What's going on, guys?
titties and underwear, just like he said.
All right.
it's gonna be a great episode? I love baby faces.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
I'm actually a big fan of heels. Like I root for heels on purpose, but
Dude,
you gotta, like I said before, you gotta have a yin to a yang. Like if you don't have a good baby face, you don't have a good heel,
Right.
and vice versa.
And I so relate because I got such a great baby face. So I love baby faces.
shave that fucking chin strap shit.
And heels. Oh, man. So many great baby faces throughout history. And even now, making people love them and making the other people that hate them even more, like Jesse.
What to you guys? I'm curious. Before we get into our list, do you guys like? What are the criteria for like a good baby face? Like, what do you guys look for like a good baby face?
Honestly, for me, it's how the crowd perceives that person. Like, I mean, we've all seen baby faces that have tried to get over with the crowd for years, and they don't, which just turns into them not being a good baby face. Perfect example was early babyface Roman Reigns. Like,
Right.
He was just not over anywhere, and he was being pushed. Like, you could see the push was very evident, and it just wasn't resonating with the crowd, and he failed in that aspect. He was forgetting lines and promos. Like, you could tell the crowd was just screwing him up because they were not behind him.
Yeah.
So I think, like, when it comes to being a good babyface or having that good babyface persona, it starts with the crowd. It starts with the WWE universe, if you will, or even the AEW universe, whatever we're calling their fans. But it starts there. And then it just goes into booking, honestly, how they're booked, who they're booked against. Like Jesse said, it's the yin and yang. You can't have a good babyface without a good heel.
Yeah. It comes down to the crowd for sure. Like if the crowd isn't buying into it, the babyface isn't going to get over. The company might be pushing the babyface, like that's who they want you to root for. But ultimately, if the crowd isn't behind you, and then like we said, the babyface needs like a good heel. If you have like two babyfaces against each other, like what good is it sometimes other than just maybe a great wrestling match? Somebody that the crowd really relates to. Like I want to relate to that wrestler or that person more in an aspect, and sometimes you relate more to the heels too in some ways, but the more you can relate to the babyface, the more you want to see them win. And yeah, what about you?
I don't know. I think a lot of people have natural like organic charisma, and that just you can't teach that. That can't be booked. That can't be you got to just have it, and some people do and some people don't. Like the example with Roman Reigns, like that wasn't like he wasn't organically getting over with the crowd.
Right.
The WWE was like, this is who we're giving to you guys as our babyface, and they just didn't accept it, but other wrestlers over time just naturally like just had that charisma and that energy, and like fans bought into it. And like I said, people realize real, and when it's somebody that's real, and like you said, you can relate to them and you can understand them and buy into what they're selling. Like you want to back that person, you want to be a part of whatever wave this particular wrestler's riding on. And it's pretty interesting, I mean, over time through the evolution of pro wrestling and sports entertainment, as they call it, they've been a lot of anti-heroes too, like
right,
people that aren't supposed to be the baby face, but people just buy into what they're doing, and it just resonates with them to where like they want to support this guy regardless, or guy or girl, regardless of their push or their booking or whatever. They just naturally become over with the fans. And yeah, it's real interesting. It's real interesting. You know, the industry has gone through such an evolution now that you don't have to be that like smiling, kissing babies and shaking hands guy, pro America, anti whatever, you know, like whatever they're pushing in the 80s and 90s. It just doesn't have to be that way anymore, you know?
Right. And a lot of things with like baby faces too, a lot of times that make them so big, it'll be like this type of underdog story too coming up, and, you know, defying the odds and being able to overcome these big obstacles, which is ultimately obviously part of the story, but that's what makes a story so good most of the time. Yeah, there's been a lot of like wrestlers like that in the past, and sure we'll touch on some that kind of border that babyface heel or anti-hero character, which is a lot of them nowadays, or even going back to some of the biggest ones. And a lot of them have been so good, they've just been great at their craft in general that they can do both. And they're both believable because they do have that it factor, that charisma, or they're just great on the mic or great in the ring. And yeah. So when I think of like a true underdog story, going back to the early 90s, there was somebody called, he was a jobber and he went by very many names at first. He had a few matches, but he had a bigger match that people remember on a Monday Night Raw episode, which was against Razor Ramon. And he ended Razor Ramon for a pin for the 1-2-3, and then he became known as the 1-2-3 Kid. And he was a huge babyface for a time.
It was interesting too because Razor Ramon, like we've talked about, was such a big heel and just went out and embarrassed him every week. And then it was to the point where it was like you almost like expected, okay, Razor's going to win this match. So like you said, when he hit him, I believe, with the moonsault and got him with the 1-2-3 out of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
The crowd just lost it at like the Manhattan Center or whatever. The crowd just absolutely lost it. And then Razor Ramon ended up like goading him into a match, like a $10,000 match to get him back in the ring.
With the
like,
$1 Million Man and stuff. He was putting up money for it.
Razor Ramon had like a duffel bag with like $10,000, and he was out in the ring on Monday Night Raw, and he was like, I got $10,000, says you won't get back in the ring with me again. The 1-2-3 Kid comes out and gets his ass whooped, and then just rolls out of the ring, grabs the bag, and just like runs out of the arena and takes Razor Ramon's money. Like, awesome. But the crowd just ate it right up.
Yeah, and from that point he was just over. He becomes X-Pac and Six and all this stuff, and him and Razor Ramon after that went on to be a tag team. He turned Razor Ramon babyface too at that point, and they had matches.
Good starting babyface, and it's an underneath, like you said, the underdog that overcomes, and people just wanted to see him win. Like, they didn't care if he got beat every week; they wanted to see him get the win. You know,
right.
Yep. And I also think another thing that makes certain baby faces that much greater than others is the ability to not have to change up their character much and continue to be that baby face for the majority of their career. It's only been done a handful of times, if I believe, but I think that also just helps factor into whether or not you're a good babyface. If you could be believable for more than a short period of time.
Yep, that's true. You got anybody in mind with that while we're on the subject of it?
I do. I honestly don't think this guy's ever been a heel, not as far as I can remember, maybe before I was around, but Rey Mysterio. I mean, has he ever been a heel?
I don't think so.
Not unless maybe in WCW at some point, but
that's what I'm saying.
Not sure.
Maybe way back. I don't know, but Rey does. Like, few stars can go an entire career without switching things up, but Rey was one of those that he just made it work.
Right.
He was always Rey Mysterio. I mean, the only change he would make is the type of gear he would wear. Like, I don't know. I've loved Rey Mysterio since the beginning. But, yeah, Rey is one of those guys that every feud and rivalry he was in, he was the big little man. I think it was the tagline. He was the biggest little man in sports entertainment. He had that great feud with the Big Show in the mid-2000s or early 2000s.
Yeah.
His feuds with Eddie, he was always the babyface. His feud with Chavo, he was always the babyface. Even when him and Batista broke up as a tag team, he was the babyface there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he always got the big win when it mattered most. And when he would lose these big moments, like there's one moment in my childhood that I can't remember how old I was. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it had to do with the Great Khali.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know what I'm getting at. When Great Khali squashed Ray's head like it was a can of spaghetti. And blood was just pouring down his face. As a child, I ran to my mother like, oh my God, look what they're doing to him. I was heartbroken. I thought he just killed Ray on live TV.
Yeah. Yeah, Ray was a great babyface. He was obviously a huge underdog, always just that height and that size. And he was also great because he was able to get in the ring with all these huge guys, like you said, and still put on good matches and make it believable. And he was always over with the crowd. Everybody loved the 619 and all the different masks. I have a friend, and his favorite wrestler is Rey Mysterio.
Oh wow.
Jr.
Yeah.
Shout out Dave. Yeah.
And look at what he did in the early 90s when he initially was, well, he was in Mexico obviously, but then came to ECW. They had like a cruiserweight, little thing. They had a few guys, and then they ended up going to WCW and started the cruiserweight division. And you had like Juventud Guerrero and fucking Psychosis, and even Chris Jericho was a part of the cruiserweight division back then. And this Mexican style of wrestling that wasn't exposed on American TV, and he was like at the forefront of it. He was like the guy. He was the top guy. Rey Mysterio was who everybody wanted to win, and it speaks volumes, like you said, how he fought all the big monsters and was the underdog and like the little guy trying to overcome, and like able to have good matches with the big guys. And he also had phenomenal matches in the cruiserweight divisions as well.
Right.
I gotta say, I'm gonna go old school here and talk about the longest reigning, well, I'll say the Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion of all time, Bruno Sammartino. And if you want to talk about like baby faces as far as like getting over with the crowd and the crowd backing them, I don't think there was anybody that watched the WWF back then that wasn't a Bruno Sammartino fan. We're talking about holding the championship for over 2,000 days, close to 3,000 days, and everywhere he went, he was like beloved. And like I said, he was that consummate, like shaking hands, kissing babies face. And I learned later on, I read somewhere, I don't know the truth behind stuff. Like I said, I try not to speculate too much on stuff, but like the Italian mob had a big deal and a big hand in him being the champion so long. And
really,
I don't know what's the truth or not to that, but
right.
But like anywhere you went, like pro wrestling back in the 70s wasn't like, it was almost like taboo to be like a wrestling fan, and it was kind of like shunned and whatever, but everybody knew who Bruno Sammartino was. Like he transcended the wrestling ring and was like mainstream, and was like one of the first mainstream pro wrestlers. And everything he did, he lost the title and got it back and held it for like another 1,000 days, over 1,000 days. You know what I mean? Like just how much Vince McMahon Sr. had faith in his ability to draw numbers and draw crowds and get over with the crowd, and shout out Bruno Sammartino. I got to meet him like, I don't know, quite a while ago, 12 years ago, something like that. And
wow.
Just like a very friendly, I've met a lot of like former wrestlers, retired pro wrestlers that when you meet them, it's kind of just like a, hey, how you doing? The keep it moving type thing. But Bruno like took time to talk to me and my brother and like have a conversation, and was just very friendly. And I heard that he had like a distaste for the business, like he lost like love for it, but like he still was very friendly to like the fan base and stuff. And like I don't think he ever held it against the fan base, and that was 30 years after he held the title. You know what I mean? So
wow. That's insane. Yeah, that's something that could never really happen these days. I mean, Roman Reigns held the title for a long time, of course, but especially with like social media and just how things, drag out, and we're on kind of like a quicker schedule time these days.
Right.
Yeah.
How
I
quick
don't-
fans turn on somebody.
Yeah.
You go from
social.
being like the top guy, and then all of a sudden you become champion. Like we see it nowadays with like Cody Rhodes, and I hate to kind of get off subject, but like
Yeah.
how over he was, and how like, and he even is, but you're starting to hear that little spattering.
Yeah.
He became champion. He finished his story. He's the champion now, and now all of a sudden you're feeling that little rumbling of people starting to turn on him as soon as he reaches the mountaintop. And
real quick, and I don't so much think it's him. I think it's the fact that the belt was on Roman for so long without any change.
Mm-hmm.
That now that Roman's, taking a little vacation, taking the break he's very well deserved, people want to see, like, I don't know, more changeover with the title, maybe. I mean, maybe not necessarily see Cody lose it right away, but maybe they just want to see it go on different people that didn't get a chance to hold it in the last 3.5 years.
Well, I think a big thing a lot with, a babyface or even a heel, but a babyface with being champion too is somebody that can kind of carry the company. Like you talked about Bruno Sammartino. He carried the company for a long time, obviously. So that's one of those big aspects too that you asked about earlier. And I think that plays into it also, as far as like a babyface champion. Yeah.
And it's hard to, like Bruno was the champion for so long as a babyface. And then he lost the championship to the Russian Bear, Ivan Koloff. And like, we're talking about Cold War times when like the Russian Bear and everybody hated him. And it was like, it's harder to transition from a long-term heel champion to a babyface champion. Roman was, people cheered for him, but he was babyface. He was a heel. People recognized the bloodline was a heel faction, and to go from that to the babyface is just a different transition. And people aren't comfortable with change.
You cater to a different crowd when you do a change like that, going from such a heel to America's biggest babyface now.
Yeah,
like you got a different group of people that are cheering for that than you had cheering for the bloodline.
Right, definitely. So speaking on people that like carry the company, and you went old with Bruno Sammartino, so I'm gonna go somewhat more newer, in a way that carried the company. And I was speaking like some early 20-year-olds and asking them like who their favorite wrestlers were, because of course we grew up like different times and our nostalgia is different for wrestling for who we thought was the greatest. And what they had to say was they thought John Cena was the GOAT and their greatest. And he kind of started off as a heel a little bit, not with the earlier Kurt Angle match, but when he kind of did the Dr. Thugonomics for a little bit, he wasn't quite over in that aspect. And then, of course, he went on to be the John Cena that he really was, and held the championship plenty of times and held the company up. And everybody loved John Cena, especially the kids. Wasn't quite over with a lot of adults and still isn't. But in retrospective, I have a lot of respect for John Cena now. And looking back, I really appreciate him. I didn't back then, but now, as for what he did and who he is, and when he comes back, I really respect him now.
Yeah, and he was so polarizing.
I was never a John Cena guy in the early 2000s, up even the mid to late 2000s. But now that his appearances are so much more spread out, and when he comes back, he's more or less putting over the younger talent. Yeah. I like him more now than I did. If that makes sense. Like, you talked about the Dr. Thugonomics is when he was slightly heelish.
Yeah.
When he was starting to try to find his character and what he was going to do.
Right.
And then when he went to being the leader of the Chain Gang, that's when he really started becoming the babyface. And I think his big babyface transition, there's two moments. First moment, beating JBL at WrestleMania for the Undisputed title. That picture of him in the crowd with the belt, right there, like he was so over. And then his return at the Royal Rumble, I believe it was 2008, really solidified him. When he came back, he was supposed to be out for 9 months, came back after 2. I've never seen a crowd pop like that. I mean, it was Madison Square Garden, so.
Yeah, and it was funny, too, because everybody popped when he came out. And then when he got into the ring, the "Let's go Cena sucks" thing started up. Like, but initially everybody was like, "Oh my God, Cena's here," and then like quickly, he was very polarizing. Like,
Yeah.
And he, like, once he became John Cena, like, he never switched heel. There was a lot of like rumblings that maybe he would, at some point turn heel and stuff, but he stuck to his guns regardless. Except for the only time I think that you can think he played heel, and this isn't like my next pick or nothing, but like the ECW One Night Stand had the title match against Rob Van Dam.
Yeah.
And everybody wanted everybody in that, the Hammerstein Ballroom or whatever, everybody wanted Rob Van Dam to win. Like, Rob Van Dam was ECW's guy. There was a sign up, people put up these half-hearted signs all the time that are, okay, what are you really going to do? But they had a sign hanging from the balcony that said, if Cena wins, we riot. And like, legitimately, like, that crowd was going to riot if John Cena won that match. Like, he did his trademark throwing his shirt in the crowd, and they were throwing it back at him. And,
like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
His hat, his shirt, like throwing shit in the ring, the toilet paper, the cups to get the ring, to get it started. Yeah.
And then it was like, Cena was always the babyface everywhere he went, every like arena they had was at and stuff. But like that night, he was the heel, no matter you weren't telling those people anything different.
No. There was nothing they could have done to make anybody cheer for him in that building that night.
Yeah.
That's probably one of my favorite, especially not being a John Cena person, seeing a crowd react that way to him made me so happy.
And that's why he was so great too, because he could play into, the character of who he was. And when he knew that, he would just kind of put the championship up and look down and portray himself a little differently than he would normally do when he would come out in his regular entrances when he was supposed to be the face.
Right.
You've seen it with CM Punk and, other times also, but yeah.
I will say, there was one thing we got out of him that still I don't like to this day, was the damn spinner belt. As synonymous as that belt is with that era, I hated that belt with a burning passion.
I hated the Edge spinning belt even more.
Anything they did with the spinner belt. Like, do you remember they tried selling a Miz version online with the M, but it's just the W half spun.
Well, I mean, it did fit his gimmick, to be fair.
It did. It did, but like, still.
Because he had the United States one, the United States spinner first, and then the...
Yeah.
But he was kind of past that a little bit at that point, but...
He only used that U.S. spinner belt for, like a couple months before it was gone. The next one leading into this, I'm going to go back into the past a little bit. I think he was probably the biggest babyface in the 80s, even late 70s and 80s. Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Hulkamania.
I mean, exactly. Hulk Hogan was probably the biggest babyface ever. Second to Bruno Sammartino, if you will.
Brother.
But Hulkster, I mean, what can't you say about Hulkster? He was the babyface against Andre, but he was also a movie star who managed to go back and forth. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Three Ninjas with Hulk Hogan as the bad guy.
I don't know if I saw that one. I probably have. It was probably a long time ago. Yeah.
It was definitely a long time ago. That was back in the VHS days.
I remember Thunder in Paradise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Nanny.
Yeah.
Suburban Commando.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Hulk Hogan was my first favorite wrestler, for sure. He was a top baby face. Like, you always wanted to rip your shirt and have on the yellow shirt.
And how many times if you couldn't hear someone talking did you ever do this growing up?
Yeah, this and
that. And that's when wrestling became mainstream too. We talked about with WrestleMania 1 with being like the lead up on MTV, and when it started becoming nationally, less territories and more national, and he was like the forefront, like the head guy. Say your prayers, take your vitamins, fucking.
Yeah.
He was just
what you gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, he was full of one-liners, and all he would have to do to cut a promo is go to the ring, say each of his one-liners, get the crowd hyped, and then leave.
Yeah. He didn't have to do much. I mean,
no.
The leg drop was his finisher. I mean,
that's the one thing that bothers me. How you get away with a leg drop being your finisher for?
well, nowadays you wouldn't, but back then
No.
you absolutely could, because that's just how wrestling was back then. It was built up to be so much more. Each move was, and we've spoken on that before. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people have clotheslines for finishers now. I mean, but
that's true.
Rainmaker!
And Hogan didn't need to do much in the ring. Like he was all charisma, and that's what people wanted to see him hulking up. When they used to put, I think not everybody, but most people he faced, they put him in the sleeper hold, and the referee dropped his arm for one, dropped his arm for two, and then he'd fucking hulk up and point, and then he'd do the same old shit, the big boot to the leg drop, And
I like when someone would like hit him with a chair, and he'd just go like this, turn around,
yeah, and being so like American, that's what it was. And then with his theme song, it just fit with the times.
A
and
real American.
Yeah, there you go.
You hear
Sing
that
it.
beat hit.
Yeah. Sing it. Yeah.
That crowd came unglued every time.
Yeah.
Whether they knew he was coming or if it was a surprise.
Moving to my next one is somebody that he got to the top of the mountain, but never really wanted to be the top of the mountain. Like, I think he was okay with where he was at, and it's somebody that early in his career was in a tag team that was kind of heelish, but when he went solo, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was like the ultimate babyface, could do no wrong guy on and off camera. People talk about like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was so straight-laced and just very no controversy outside of the ring, and he had classics with Ric Flair in the NWA, WCW, and then came to, he was in the WWF and had that instant classic with Randy Savage for the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 3. And he brought it every time. Like, he didn't have to get over with his words. He wasn't really a big promo guy. He wasn't like that type wrestler.
Right.
But what he could do, he produced in the ring, and people backed up and followed him. And I've heard that like he never wanted to be like a world champion. He never wanted to be the main guy. He just wanted to go his craft in the ring and go home and provide for his family. Like that's what he wrestled for. And he wasn't there for the glitz and glamour and everything else. He was there to provide for his family. And that says a lot because, ego is a big thing in pro wrestling. And for somebody to not have an ego, going back to, like I said, his matches with Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight title in the 80s was just masterclass wrestling. And I think they had 3 matches and for the World Heavyweight title in the 80s, and it was just masterclass. And like we said, WrestleMania 3, the main event was Hogan and Andre. Everybody was there. Everybody tuned in to see Hogan and Andre. And if you don't think Macho Man and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat stole the show, then you have a skewed view at pro wrestling,
Right.
I love Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I love the whole dragon gimmick when he had the big headset when he came out, when he came to WWF, and it was gimmicks and stuff. And he had a feud with Jake the Snake Roberts at one time, and Jake the Snake had the snake, and then Ricky the Dragon Steamboat pulled out a Komodo dragon, and like and it was like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, what the fuck is this, And my brother Cody has never been a wrestling fan, but like when a pro wrestler catches his attention to where he wants to watch it, I'm like, okay, something's grabbing him. And Ricky the Dragon and Jake the Snake Roberts and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat like captured him, And
it's awesome.
I loved Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And like I said, his ability to just put ego aside and just provide for the business and get people over in the ring, and it's very admirable to see, because you don't see much of that. I mean, maybe more now these days, but in the 80s and 90s when it was very competitive, you didn't see that very much.
Yeah, and he was great in the ring, like you said, at like selling and making the crowd buying into what he was doing, so they felt for him. They felt every hit against him, and they wanted to see him, build up and build that arc of that story in the ring when he was down, and be that underdog, and then finally come back and prevail at the end of those matches. Great in the ring. I'm gonna go with the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
Okay.
Yeah. He had time as a heel, obviously. I feel like he was a bigger babyface. As far as like growing up, he was also one of my first favorite wrestlers for sure. When he came and he won the Royal Rumble two times. Okay,
2 years in a row. Yep.
I remember when he hit the British Bulldog, thought that he won, and then he came and hit the British Bulldog, and of course, facing Bret Hart and the WrestleManias and being on the zip line, riding it down in the shiny suit, and just always wanting to crank up the sweet chin music, and I just related to him, because I'm a sexy boy. Oh man, no, for real. He was just great. The crowd was always behind him. Like, my sister wasn't in the wrestling, but of course she loved Shawn Michaels, and who didn't back then, as far as a woman probably.
Right.
So he was over in that sense. Had a lot of great rivalries, putting him over and stuff, and coming back from his concussions, to the Royal Rumbles and his matches.
See, I'm one of those people that I personally feel like Shawn's best work was as a heel. He would go into those moods, and you could see him transition to, like, on screen. Like, I believe he was essentially the heel in Ric Flair's retirement match.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, even towards the end of the match, you saw the character go away. You saw Shawn Michaels enter, and they had that emotion after he hit him with sweet chin music and pinned him.
Yeah.
But I just feel like part of me liked Shawn Michaels' work as a heel more, especially the feud with Marty Jannetty.
Mm-hmm.
Throwing him through the fucking window was... You can't get much more heelish than that. But,
I mean, he was he was definitely a cocky person, I'm sure, and definitely, like you spoke on ego, definitely had that big ego. But as far as like being over with the crowd, and like when you talk about him going up against Bret Hart, and Bret Hart was not a heel at that point when they fought. They were both baby faces, for somewhat, and people wanted Shawn to win,
right.
and they gave him his flowers a lot at that time.
Yeah, the build up to that match, the Iron Man match.
Yeah,
the build up was just hilarious too, because like if you go back and watch the little vignette things they have leading up to it, like they were like WWF was purposely getting Shawn to be the baby face, and like building Bret to kind of be like the, I don't want to say heel, but just not as, you watched all the warm up videos and Shawn was doing like these inverted like pull-ups and like doing all these crazy training videos, and then like the video of Bret Hart was him like jogging down like an icy road in Canada, like like they were building Shawn up, like, and everybody knew it, and
to be the next thing to overcome. Right. Yeah,
because he was doing such heel work, and I think really his transition started at his ladder match with Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 10, and then he was still a heel for a while. The first Rumble he won, he was considered a heel, and he went up against Diesel at WrestleMania that year, WrestleMania 11, and then he kind of overcame and kept going, then won the Royal Rumble 96, and then had the Iron Man match with Bret Hart. But a lot of people Kevin brought up too, is that a lot of people don't really, they remember Shawn Michaels from the 90s, but his work in like when he came back in the 2000s and stuff was really well done as well, and when he won the Elimination Chamber match, won the World Heavyweight title, those fucking putrid brown tights and whatever, but like that coming back to the top, and I wanted Shawn Michaels to win, not for his ego, not for his like showmanship or nothing, but it was just like, like Shawn Michaels, like I just wanted to see him overcome the odds and win, and it made me back him heavily during that time.
Yeah, definitely.
And talking about overcoming the odds leads into my next pick. And he was pretty much the leader of the 2010s to late 2010s. Daniel Bryan. Could you get much more over than he was with the crowd? We're talking yes movement. Everything. Yeah. Everything with going on with the Authority to that triple threat at WrestleMania when he beat Randy Orton and Batista to become the unified World Heavyweight Champion. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like he was so over that he's not even with the company anymore, and they still do the yes chant.
Yeah.
Even he's pretty old. Would you call him a babyface with AEW?
He's been back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He played a really good heel for a little while, but I think right now you would probably consider him babyface.
Okay.
Yeah, and when he got there, for sure, of course, yeah.
I'll tell you, his last heel run in WWE is with the Eco title. I did not like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was not his best work. I thought his best work with WWE was that whole Yes movement, or even Team Hell No with Kane.
Mm-hmm.
He was a heel, but like they were loved so much that they were damn near a babyface.
Mm-hmm. That was organically what we talked about, organically getting over with the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
People saw what he did in the ring, and like you said, with Batista having the match at WrestleMania, and the crowd refused that to be the WrestleMania main event. You know, they wanted Daniel Bryan, and nobody was going to tell him any different. And like the big Yes movement, that was blurring the lines back then when he had the people come out with the Yes shirts surrounding the ring.
Yeah.
And it was like, wait a minute, is this real? Like, you know, like when something in wrestling happens to, like, for me, when something happens in wrestling and I look at it and I'm like, wait a minute, is this real? Like, is this legitimate? Like,
right.
That's when I'm like, okay, something's cooking right now. And that Yes movement thing was huge. You know?
Yeah, that's what I really remember from him on that episode. And it was like a huge protest. And everybody was out in the ring. The whole crowd was just doing Yes. And he was just over with the crowd. Everything pushed and got the championship. Ended up getting the championship. And he just really knew how to play in with it and capture people's attention and relate to the crowd and have the crowd relate to him.
And he was another guy that you could put in that Rey Mysterio category. He wasn't the biggest guy. He wasn't the tallest, strongest, fastest, but like you loved him.
Yeah,
the
an
crowd
underdog.
Loved the underdog.
Yeah,
and trained by Shawn Michaels. Shout out.
I don't think I've seen a bigger crowd movement than the Yes movement.
I'm gonna move on to. I mean, he went to the WWF. His big is to being a babyface was in the NWA, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes started out as a heel with Dirty Dick Murdoch as a tag team, and then kind of there's a lot of controversial stuff there. I'm not really gonna get into, but
let's just leave all that alone.
He went out on his own and became the American Dream and was the son of a plumber, and you know, his charisma, man, like the Hard Times promo that he cut. And you know, I used to just recite my brother Steve, you know, shout out Dirty Steve. My brother Steve, my other brother was a big wrestling fan as well as I was. And we used to be able to recite like all of Dusty Rhodes promos, you know, like great. You know, I wined and dined with kings and queens and slept in alleys and dined on pork and beans and like all this different shit. Like we used to like remember all of it. And like, he was just so over. And then at that time in the NWA, you know, you had the Four Horsemen, you had Ric Flair, who were like the heels and like not the common man. They were better than you and you knew it, you know, you know, and had the Rolexes and the suits and the limousine ride and jet flying. And then you had the guy that was saying, hey, my dad was a plumber. I grew up with nothing and I'm here now. And like the common wrestling fan, that's who they identified with, you know, and it just became natural, organic. And then Four Horsemen attacking Dusty in the cage, leading up to him winning the NWA World Heavyweight title. Like when I watched Cody win the match at WrestleMania, it was very reminiscent of when Dusty won the World Heavyweight title back in the NWA, like the baby faces coming out and putting him up on his shoulders and marching him around the ring and everything else. And then he had phenomenal work as like a booker as well. And I'm not really gonna, you know, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about baby faces. But then he went to the WWF, and Vince McMahon almost tried to like punk him, like by like making him wear the polka dots and fucking, you know what I mean? Like just,
I think Vince intended for him to become a jobber. He
wanted to bury him. Wanted to bury him because of all the work he did against the WWF, you know, and Dusty like took that persona and just ran with it. And his manager Sapphire used to come out with him, you know, like these, you know, a lot of managers were men, but like when it's a female manager or valet or whatever you want to call it. They were like pretty women, and they had like this overweight woman coming out with Dusty Rhodes and stuff.
Mhm.
And like, he just made the whole thing work, and really making lemonade out of lemons, you know? And
Yeah.
like, you didn't have to have the best physique. He didn't have to have the best in-ring work, but when he talked and when he was in the ring, you believed everything he did, you know? And a lot of wrestling fans, especially back then,
Mhm.
were hardworking people. You know, they were just, they worked hard to buy their ticket to go to those shows. And
Right.
they wanted to cheer for the guy that was a hardworking man that wasn't handed everything, didn't have the silver spoon in his mouth like some of these heels portrayed, you
Right.
know? And it just, like I said, it was natural. It was just like an atom bomb went off, you know? And
Yeah.
a lot of Dusty Rhodes stuff was really good in the late 80s.
That
To the
blue
point where
collar
he's-
worker. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Early
to the
80s,
point
I'm
where
sorry,
he's
early
still
80s.
very much talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Yeah.
before Cody came back, Dusty Rhodes' name was mentioned quite often.
The respect in the business.
Yeah.
People in the
Hell,
business
he's got a
respected him
statue
and
now.
still do.
Yeah. And how could you mention either without the other now?
Mm-hmm.
Either or. You know, they're
exactly.
just both, excuse me, they're just both so over. And Babyfaces now and Cody and Dusty. Yeah. So I'm going to go to WCW and speak on somebody that was pretty much always a babyface. They tried to turn him a little bit at one point, but he was always over with the crowd, had great feuds with Ric Flair, came out as the Surfer Sting. You know, Sting was over with the crowd. He was a top babyface. Everybody loved him. He was one of the biggest in that company, and leading up to that too, in other places. Like I said, they tried to somewhat turn him heel at one point in WCW with the stable. No, I forget the name of it. Excuse me. It didn't work, and then that's when we got the Crow Sting, which was massively over and kind of that anti-hero, but he was still babyface. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then came the WWE. That's came back at one point.
Before he came to WWE, let's not ignore his work that he
TNA.
did in TNA.
Yeah.
Like Joker Sting is still probably one of my favorite. I mean, I know he was a heel, but like everyone loved him.
Yeah.
Crazy Sting. Everyone loved that gimmick so much. Like just taking the paint, rubbing it all over Hulk Hogan's face.
Mm-hmm.
Just laughing maniacally. Like I think some of his best work in the later stages of his career was TNA.
Yeah.
TNA, his work was better there than it was in WWE, personally.
Yeah, and then, Vince lets him come back to WWE to face Triple H.
Just to bury him.
Just to bury him. Like we spoke about, Dustin
that
Rhodes.
WrestleMania match with Triple H pissed me off so much. Because,
Yeah.
Sting clearly should have won that.
Yeah.
In every sense of the word win.
Yeah.
And they even buried him with his own stable.
Yeah, well,
like
whatever.
the group he was a part of
Yeah.
Well,
wow. Let it go.
And that's
No.
that's what got him so over with the Crow Sting.
Yeah.
Was they kept showing him up in the rafters and stuff, and that's when NWO was taking over WCW.
Right.
Everybody's
that
like,
was a slow burn, wasn't it?
Is he? Oh yeah, yeah. And it was like, is he with NWO? Is he siding with Team WCW? Who is he a part of? And then he came out and just attacked WCW or NWO. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He came out and attacked NWO and sided with the WCW, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, like Sting's with us," And
oh yeah.
It just wow, it was like a firecracker, It was like, man, oh man, because wearing the black and white and everything else, everybody just assumed he was going to side with the NWO initially. He later joined, but when he came out and teamed with WCW to take on the NWO, it was like,
oh yeah,
this is our guy. This is our guy.
They needed that. They needed that for for sure.
But going into the darker persona of Sting leads perfectly into my final pick, as far as dark personas go. The Undertaker.
No.
Some of his best moments, like I know he was a really good heel, especially with the Ministry. But like one of my favorite Undertaker feuds was that feud with Edge towards the end of his career. That whole arc with Vicky Guerrero, the Edgeheads, Undertaker coming back and choke slamming Edge through the ring in Hell in a Cell, and then the fire. Like, everyone knows the Undertaker was the reason I even got into professional wrestling.
Mhm.
And the American Badass babyface version was awesome. And then when he
Yeah.
brought the Phenom back against Kane at WrestleMania 20, he hasn't been a heel since that moment, I believe. And I one of my another favorite arc of mine of his was the CM Punk angle.
Right.
I think we touched on that last week as far as talking about heels, but once again, you can't have a good heel without a good babyface, and you can't have a good babyface without a good heel.
Mhm.
I think CM Punk, Paul Heyman, and Undertaker really fed off of each other perfectly.
Yeah,
in
they
that WrestleMania
really understood how to do it to get people to hate Punk.
They did, especially when he dumped the urn out.
Yeah, but there was also people that wanted him to win and end that streak too.
100%. Honestly,
Yeah.
that was probably one of the years where I wouldn't have been mad if the streak ended. You know, like
Right.
I still think that streak shouldn't have ended to Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, agreed.
I wholeheartedly, if anybody, I think Taker said in an interview, if it should have been anybody, he wanted it to be Bray Wyatt. But that's my final guy. Is I got the Undertaker. Surprised no one else has mentioned him yet. That's all.
I got two. I'm trying to pick between them for my final one. Just I'm gonna go with this one just to further. Andy mentioned last week with the heels with Andy Kaufman. I'm gonna say Jerry the King Lawler.
Okay.
And Jerry the King Lawler was always a heel in WWF for the most part until his later announcing days. But back in the 80s in the Memphis territory of wrestling, the reason why he became the king was because he was so over. They called him the King of Wrestling, Jerry Lawler, you know, and he ran Memphis wrestling and was one of those larger than life wrestlers as far as like he transcended wrestling and became like a household name in Memphis and elsewhere. But like, you know, that was his like home base back in the territory days, and his iconic feud with Andy Kaufman was just really well done. And for him to back in those days take that on, you know, I think really because Andy Kaufman was a national star and he wanted to get more spotlight on his territory of wrestling, so he took on that whole angle with coming out and pile driving Andy Kaufman and like later having a match with him. You know, but it's easy. Babyface work is easy when you have a really good heel, because when you have somebody that the crowd just absolutely can't stand, you're looking for anyone to take him down and shut him up.
Right.
And what better person? You have Andy Kaufman coming out and like just basically shitting all over the people in the Memphis territory, and then like having Jerry the King Lawler, who was the biggest guy in that territory, coming out. And it wasn't a mid-card guy coming out to have a feud or anything. It was Jerry the King Lawler came out.
Right.
And, you know, the slap heard around the world on the late night show. And, you know, everything about it was just awesome, to where he came to WWF and was like the snot nose, like mouthy, like heel commentator. You know, he did some in-ring work as well, but, and later in his career, Jerry the King Lawler was like an icon by the end of his wrestling career. I got to see him wrestle live a few years ago, and it was, you know, latter stages of his career. He's in a tag match and whatever, but like, I'm talking about an event where I saw a lot of like top guys from today: John Moxley, Penta, El Zero Miedo, whatever. Jungle Boy, I saw wrestle. Jack Perry, I saw wrestle that event. But like, I was most Darby Allin, I got to see wrestle at that event. But like, the one I was most excited for was Jerry the King Lawler, you know. And for him to come out and just stand on the ropes for 90% of the match, come in, drop his arm strap, and do the fist off the second rope, and man, oh man, Jerry Lawler's really great. Even as a heel, I liked him. You know, he was so good as a heel, he made me like him. You know, that's
he
like
was that like dirty old man as a heel too, and
he's so bad.
Especially in
like,
his later years.
He had a feud with Jake Roberts when Jake Roberts was getting sober, and Jerry Lawler was dumping liquor in his mouth and shit, and like, it was just fucking wild. But you know, nothing. When something is as nuclear as Jerry the King Lawler and Andy Kaufman, like it gets national attention in a small base territory, like you got over. And shout out to him for getting over in that time.
Yeah, shout out to Jerry Lawler on commentary with JR too. Like some of my favorite. Duo. Yeah, great.
One honorable mention, real quick, and I'm just gonna do it, and you're all gonna know who I'm talking about.
Okay.
Joe Hendry.
Jeez. Couldn't help yourself, could you?
Nope, I couldn't.
All right. I'll throw out a few honorable mentions. One is a somewhat bigger one from the more recent years, and that got over organically. Definitely wasn't supposed to happen. Kind of relates to Daniel Bryan because he ended up facing Daniel Bryan at Kofi Mania to win the championship, and that was Kofi Kingston. That was a great lead up. It really got me really interested the WWE at that point again, as I had been turned off a little bit, and I really wanted Kofi to win, and he had to fight his way through all types of shit to get there, and he ended up winning. Championship reign was, all right. He never ended up turning heel, still hasn't from that. But he was over with the crowd, and yeah, I was a fan.
He definitely could have turned heel too, especially the way they took the belt off him.
Yeah.
In that, 10-second squash match against Brock Lesnar on a fucking throwaway episode of SmackDown?
Yeah.
That was... It still bothers me.
Bailey was hugging Bailey. She's still over to this day now. I
think
she
she's
goes
more
back
over
and forth
now
a little.
Than she was.
Yeah, but
NXT Bailey was.
Yeah, exactly. NXT
fire.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll have an honorable mention. I'll say the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom, Road Warrior Animal and Hawk. They did a lot of heel work, but to this day, people still call when a person gets a huge pop when they come out to the crowd, they still call it a Road Warrior pop. Because when Road Warriors music used to hit in the 80s and 90s, and the big pop they would get from the crowd whenever they would come out, people still call it, when you get a huge pop when you come out, people to this day still call it the Road Warrior pop.
Yeah.
That was just something, they were a spectacle, absolute spectacle.
For sure.
We got some matches for the week. Anybody got any matches for the week can talk about?
Okay.
I do. It's more of a current match. It's about 2 years ago. And before I get into the match, I want to talk about the stipulation that the match was under, which was Hell in a Cell. And that match type kind of became just a regular match because of how many times it was used over the last few years. Whereas back in the day, Hell in a Cell was used to end a feud. Primarily, it was to, like, the last place two guys would duke it out was in Hell in a Cell.
Okay.
And I'm talking about the Torn Pec Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins in Hell in a Cell, which was an instant classic in my opinion. Yeah. I loved everything about that match. The fact that Cody even came out, and then to reveal his torn pec, and to go out there and put on a match like that with someone you don't even like, it translated into great in-ring work by both him and Seth Rollins.
Yeah, I agree. Great showmanship, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's my match of the week.
All right, I'm going to go back in time. We spoke about the dog collar match between CM Punk and MJF before, and I don't think that would be as prominent or even as over if we didn't go back to Starrcade 83, Roddy Piper versus Greg the Hammer Valentine in a dog collar match. A brutal match, a nice lead up to it. Starrcade was like that was before WrestleMania. That was like the big wrestling event of the year. And, you had this whole big, Roddy Piper revealed the dog collar in a promo that he had like these collars with spikes sticking out of it, like the little spike, metal spikes sticking out of it with the chain, and was like, just building the match to where it was like, oh, this is going to be brutal. One of the most brutal things we ever saw. And it was a brutal match. They both put a huge effort in. At point, I don't know. I believe it's true. It was kind of felt storyline for a while, but I believe it was true that at one point Greg Valentine like balled the chain around his hand and hit Piper in the side of the head and busted his eardrum during the match. And blood. The only reason I think, because leading up to the match there was build to his ear being damaged, and in the match the commentators are really building that. And then he got hit in the ear and blood was coming out of his ear. And what they said was Roddy Piper burst his eardrum and he lost his equilibrium in the match. Like, he could barely even stand up straight and just continued to perform and ultimately got the win over Greg the Hammer Valentine. And just an old school drag out brutal matchup. And it's just an instant classic. You know, it's not technical, not the most technical sound pro wrestling match you'll ever watch. But if you talk about just two guys going out there and just putting it all out there and working the crowd and working in the ring to get that match over, it's top tier.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's probably the match that Punk was trying to pay homage to with MJF too, especially when he did the reveal with that dog collar match. And yeah, I believe he spoke on both of them in that promo too. Yeah. Classic. I'll go to a classic. It might not have been the greatest match, but when I was growing up, I loved it and I thought it was the coolest thing. And that would be WrestleMania 11. And that would be LT Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow. LT came out with Salt and Pepper doing his theme song.
Oh my!
What a man, what a mighty good man.
Yeah, you know,
clip that.
NFL Hall of Famer. The whole crowd was in on it. Like I said, not the greatest match, but the crowd was wild for it. He sold it as being the babyface, and Bam Bam Bigelow as the big bad heel, of course. Yeah. It was just one of them throwback matches to my childhood that I'll never forget, and it's one you should all check out.
Match was so good because we talked about Shawn Michaels winning Royal Rumble 95, and then he faced Diesel at that WrestleMania, and the heavyweight championship match wasn't even the main event. The main event was Lawrence Taylor against Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yeah.
You know, that was like the main event of the night, you know. And actually Lawrence Taylor held his own in the ring for never wrestling before or whatever. He actually held his own pretty well, and shout out to Bam Bam Bigelow for carrying the match as well.
Yeah, yeah. For sure.
One last honorable mention, Stone Cold.
Yeah. Of course. Well, I mean, he was kind of like that anti-hero type of...
Okay, yeah, but the way the crowd cheered for him as far as being the guy that would beat up his boss.
Yeah, yeah. He was over. He's a babyface for sure. Yeah. You can't...
And we were talking about that, like, well, I was talking about, actually at the beginning of the episode, I was talking about, like, getting over organically and not meaning to be a babyface. That's who I was referencing, actually, you know? And he never changed his persona, even when he turned to a babyface. He still said the same stuff, wrestled the same way in the ring, you know, just carried himself the same way. You know, he never, if you look at his heel work to his babyface work, he didn't change anything except for the crowd cheering him.
Right.
Like, that's the only thing that changed.
Like, once he became the Texas Rattlesnake after he was stunning Steve Austin and he went Stone Cold, he was and still is Stone Cold. I mean, hell, on his beard it says Stone Cold Steve Austin's broken skull.
No shit.
And when he left WCW and went to ECW and was superstar Steve Austin, that's where his promos really fucking took off.
Yeah.
And when he was in ECW, he was he was so good, you know. There's also another thing. I watched a video on it. I think it was Paul Heyman talking about it. That he didn't know how to do like a backstage, like a pre-tape promo, and he was like fumbling and stuff. And Paul Heyman said, just say what's on your mind. Just say what's upsetting you. What's, you know, air your grievances. And Steve Austin just cut this phenomenal promo. You can find it on YouTube or wherever. And it was phenomenal. I think I've seen a
clip of it where he makes a Monday NyQuil, I believe.
Oh, a bunch of those. Yeah. He did a bunch of those. Yes. Yeah. And then Yeah, he did like a Hulk Hogan, and yeah, but it started off with this one promo, and he carried that into WWF, like that character, you know.
Yeah. And we didn't mention everybody, of course. There's so many great baby faces and that go to heels, and like I said, they've played both, and we talked about some of our favorites, greatest of all time wrestlers, and most of them were baby faces at one point too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
And this is the point where we say, if you've gotten this far on the episode and you have some of your favorite baby faces, let us know in the comments, because we would like to hear some of the people that you love and the reason why you love them growing up, or even today.
Yeah. And let us know what we messed up too.
Lightning Kid.
Yeah, the Lightning Kid. Yeah. I think there's like 10 other names he went by too at some point.
The Cannonball Kid. Yeah.
The Cannonball Kid. Yeah. The Jobber. Yeah.
Not gonna lie, Dynamite Kid sounded right though.
Not the Dynamite Kid. Yeah. No. I retract that statement. Yeah.
Cut all that out. All right, everybody. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe for more amazing wrestling content. I'm Kevin, along with Andy and Jesse.
Hit that like button. You've been listening to the Ringside Renaissance Wrestling Podcast. Peace. Boom.